that's your journey, but as part of that, and your particular responsibility has been mass migration. And what you're saying to people really is over the next 10 or 20 years, if we vote to stay in, that carries on at roughly the same. But you haven't been able to give me any reasons why it wouldn't.
Well, Andrew, what I've said is very simple, that in dealing with the migration issue, you have constantly to be looking at the steps that you can take in order to deal with that. We have shown that you can take steps that reduce migration. It's now gone back up again. We need, and that's why we're bringing further measures in through a new Immigration Act. But when people look at this, the question is what is right for Britain's future? Where will our prosperity best be most secure? I think that is inside the European Union. And this is not, it's not a black and white decision.
We have heard this weekend, it's a very important weekend, I think, in this debate. We've heard President Obama tell us that we will be at the back of the queue when it comes to trade. That could be 5 to 10 years, he said in Hugh Edwards' interview. That, to a lot of people, feels a rather sad and diminished moment for this country, that an American president comes over here and tells us what to do and tells us to pay attention to him. We are not the great, proud, independent country we like to think we are. We are being pushed around by the Americans again. And the British Prime Minister is nodding his head as it's going on.
Now, look, let's just look at what President Obama actually said and did. What he said was, lots of people are talking about the sort of trade deal that the UK could have with the United States if it was outside the European Union. As President of the United States, he said he would tell us what his view was, how he saw it, how he saw the facts from his point of view. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
But you knew before he came over what he was going to say, surely.
Well, it's not the first time it's been said by the American administration. US Trade Representative had said it before. So this is an issue that obviously they're setting out the facts as they see them. And I think if we're talking about, people say you can leave the EU, you can have trade deals with various countries like the United States, like Commonwealth countries. Actually, it's right that we listen to those countries and what they're saying about that.
Don't you think, though, if you were a Leave or a Brexit voter and you looked at today's paper and there are the Obamas and the royal family and Prince George, and there's President Obama playing golf in the golf buggy with David Cameron, and there's President Obama being interviewed by Hugh Edwards on the BBC, you would say this is an absolute establishment classic stitch-up. This is the big people ganging together to try and bully voters into reclaiming their country. Against reclaiming their country.
Every individual voter who goes to vote in the referendum on the 23rd of June will have a very important decision to take about our future. I think we have a positive, optimistic future inside the European Union. I think our prosperity will be more secure. I think looking across the issues of security, trade and the economy, all of these, I think, say to me, as Home Secretary, and obviously I've been dealing with some of those issues over the last 6 years, say to me that we are better off inside the European Union. And I think people will listen to what is being said by our friends and allies, will want to see the facts. President Obama said, here's from his point of view, as President of the United States, a fact about a trade deal between the United Kingdom and the United States.
So what did you make of Boris Johnson's comments about President Obama?
Well, I'm very clear that I think President Obama is perfectly reasonable for him to come over and to set things out in the way that he sees them.
You don't think there is a visceral dislike of the history of British imperialism playing as part of this story?
I think President Obama was being just very clear with people. People talk about this trade deal with the United States. Here I am as president of here he was as President of the United States saying, this is how I see it, these are the facts as I see them. And I think people will take that on board, and then they'll make their judgments looking across the whole range of issues that they need to consider when they're making the decision whether to vote to be in or out.
The Labour MP, Gisela Stewart, has written to you today, with many others, asking you not to allow Marine Le Pen into this country because of the history of the views of her party and so forth, and the danger of public disorder in the final stages of this campaign. Will you pay attention to that? What will you do?
Well, I never talk about individual decisions, but what I would say about that is actually, contrary to what I think you were trying to say earlier, Andrew, I think the fact that she's written to me to suggest that I should stop somebody coming into the country rather does suggest we have control of our borders.
Well, it depends. You could maybe be able to control Marine Le Pen, but there's still the hundreds of thousands of others. Anyway, we've had that argument. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is the proposal that there is now a way out of the big hospital dispute strike coming next week will affect your constituents and many others. And there is a proposal that if Jeremy Hunt was able to carry on with his contract as proposed, but use pilot schemes and bring it in, as it were, piecemeal, that could be a compromise which could save the country a major and damaging strike.
Well, first of all, I think the intention has always been to introduce the new contract in phases. And as I understand it, under 20% of doctors will have the new contract in August. So that's always been part of the plan, that phased introduction. And I think Jeremy Hunt has also written to the BMA
there is room
to
for
ask them.
compromise here.
Well, I think Jeremy Hunt, as I understand it, has written to the BMA and asked them to come around the table and discuss with him.
Finally, you may have heard that the discussion about these poor children who are abandoned by their parents inside the EU, refugee children. There's a vote in the House of Commons tomorrow. Isn't it a simple matter of humanity to allow these children to come into this country and rebuild their lives?
Well, I think the question we need to ask ourselves, and we've worked with the UNHCR, is what is in the best interests of these children? And what we're doing is several things, if I may just set that out. So we have a new programme with the UNHCR, which we just announced last week. That is about children at risk coming from the region, not just unaccompanied children, because sometimes children can have a family member or a guardian with them, but still be at risk, for example, of exploitation or forced marriage. So working with the UNHCR on children at risk. And also we're putting £10 million into being able to provide help and support for children who are in Europe. And that will be a range of support, but working with organisations like Save the Children, helping where children have a right to be reunited with family in the UK for that to happen.
We'll hear a lot more about this tomorrow. We're out of time. Home Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining us.